Let's start talking about miscommunication and elements of an effective request. So why don't you introduce this topic to us, and then we'll have Pete pull up the slide in a minute.
Okay, sure. The fact is we make requests every day, right? And the challenge is they're not always effective, like you said. People might have assumptions about how you want things done. There's confusion, miscoordination. So one of the things, like you mentioned about the coaching, I love about being a CEO and being a coach is that I get to help other people improve upon their skills, and customer service is a huge part of that. I'm working with one of my clients who works for a customer service organization, and she would go to her supervisor on a regular basis saying the process is broken, it needs to be fixed. So I heard a lot from her that she was very process driven, like to follow it to a T, like to be very organized, which I thought was a really great skill to have. Yep. And she was frustrated when the process was broken. So time and again, nothing happened, nothing got resolved. So by the time she got to me, she felt frustrated, powerless, not listened to. So when I asked her about, the nature of her request, she had said, well, I go and I say that the process is broken, it needs to be fixed. And I said, well, that's an observation. So she was surprised to hear, oh, I thought that was a request. No, that's an observation.
She thought she was asking for something, and actually she was telling
that this is the state of affairs, right? And so her boss didn't have the listening, and this is why coaching would be great for her boss. Her boss didn't have the listening to say, okay, great, so what is the core concern here? What's going on? He just saw it as maybe she was whining, complaining. Who knows how he interpreted it. Right. So I shared with her.
So when you said, I'm just curious, when you said you weren't asking for something, you were telling, or you were making an observation. Yeah. What was her reaction?
She was so surprised. And she realized through our coaching conversations that, oh my gosh, that's why I have the issues with my friendships and with my boyfriend and with my, it just went on, and with my mother. It's like, here I am thinking no one's listening to me, and I'm not making it a request.
Not asking anything.
Yeah, she just thinks it's just, of course, why can't you? And that's what we do. We make assumptions. We take certain things for granted. Right. We don't understand why other people can't see our point of view, and that's because they're not us. Her supervisor is not in her role. He has no idea the things that she deals with on a day-to-day basis to the extent that she deals with them. So not in his listening, not in his world.
So this sort of reminds me, and then Pete will have you pull up the slide. Yeah. This reminds me of Thanksgiving dinner. So when we host, I'm the one who's doing all the preparation, and I start to get resentful that I'm the only one doing the cooking.
Yes.
And my husband's watching football on the couch, and he's happy as a clam, and he assumes I'm happy as a clam.
Right.
I might have been when I first started, but now, hours later, not so happy. And really what I want is someone to help me.
Exactly.
But I don't ask.
Why don't they understand? Don't you see I'm doing all the work? Right. Then we fall in a victim mode, right?
Oh, I'm doing all this work, you're not helping. He goes, honey, maybe you could have asked me.
Exactly, right.
Well, maybe it's kind of obvious since I'm alone in the kitchen.
Right.
No,
it's
not
like,
obvious.
No, right,
not
exactly.
Obvious. So let's talk about the elements of how you get what you want and how you ask for what you want, and what we're calling that is elements of an effective request. And let's pull that up, Pete, and then we'll talk through and use the example. So there are three elements of it, right? The concern, so we can see it up there on the screen.
Great.
The request itself and the deadline. So walk us through an example that relates to these three.
Okay, absolutely. So the concern is huge. When you're going up to someone, it's good to give the overall, what is this, where is this coming from? So when
like that woman who said the process is broken.
The process is broken. Right. That doesn't tie into an overall concern, so her boss's listening isn't tied to the concern.
To anything, right?
So when I asked her, okay, so what is the overall concern here? And she said, well, I'm frustrated. And I said, but how does that impact the customer? Your customer service, you're dealing with customers. How is it impacting the customer? And she said, they call, they're frustrated, they ask, why does it take me 3 phone calls to get 1 answer? And she said, I know that we could get repeat bookings if we were more together, if we were a little bit more organized. And I said, that's the concern you want to bring to your supervisor. So the next is making sure that you're explicit in the request. So you're coming in, you're tying it to the overall concern. this is a customer service delivery, so that's how you start it. Get the ears perked, and her boss was very attentive and said, okay, so I'd like to have a conversation. May I request that we have a conversation? And you don't have to use the word request, but you know, I'd like to have a conversation.
I'd like to talk about this with you is a simple way to say it,
I'd like to talk to you
Right.
about this. I see it's a problem. I see it's impacting our customers, and I am concerned, and I actually have a few ideas that I'd like to get your feedback on to see if there's an approach that, you know, we can implement together.
That's great.
And he was blown away, and she was blown away that it was that easy. And I think a lot of people think that at that point when you're so frustrated and feel so powerless that it's confrontational,
Right.
and it doesn't have to be. It's
Right.
like, what is the concern? You can just go in, listen to some fun music to calm you down if you need to, take a few breaths
Right.
before you have the conversation, but it doesn't have to be in anger or frustration or, you know, blaming anybody.
Right.
And so she actually had a couple of really good ideas. One was assigning account managers to key clients, and the other one was retraining on the current process because they had a lot of growth and turnaround over the last few years, and she'd been there, and a lot of people, they weren't familiar with the system like she was. And so he said, geez, that's a really great idea. So the next part of it.
And the third, the third element of the request.
If you don't set a deadline, then what happens is work gets in the way, you get real busy, you say, I have a concern, here's how it's impacting everybody and the customer, and we should talk about it. Okay, great, we should talk about it.
Someday.
Someday.
All right.
And then you just go off, and then weeks go by, it's like, well, weren't we going to have a conversation? So with any request, it's very important to, you know, you tie it to the concern, you make the request, and when you're making the request, to say, here's what would make me satisfied. Like you said, how do you get what you want? The conditions of satisfaction. I have a few ideas, and what would make me happy here is if we had a conversation about it, are you open to it? So the conditions of satisfaction, very important in there too. So set the deadline. So she had said, I noticed on your calendar you have from 10 to 1 available on Friday. Do you have 45 minutes at 10 a.m. to set aside to have a conversation? And they did.
That's good.
Yeah.
Really great. So you can use this model, this three-pronged model, over and over again. Work-wise. So the example that you gave was an employee asking for something of her boss. And you can use it if you're a manager. And you're asking things of your employees. So being what's the concern, being very specific, right? So the person knows what it is you want to talk about. And then what would make you satisfied, like in that case, could I talk to you on Friday for 45 minutes? And then have a deadline in there as well. Right? So you can use it no matter what your job is.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Always ask each of our guests, what's your next bold move? Where are you headed? So what's yours?
So with this coaching certification that I have, and with my overall vision is to create the model, the global model for how service delivery, how service is delivered across all industries. So not just in my nifty healthcare world, but across all industries globally. I would like to have the opportunity to work with organizations who are looking to learn the skills or hire a coach to help their employees develop the skills for having bigger roles and really making a big impact that will help customer service delivery.
Great.
Yeah.
And so do you have any sense what kind of organizations or what kind of people? Just so if anybody wants to find you through LinkedIn, they can.
Yes, and this is my request too to all of you is call your organization, pretend to be a customer, and
call your own company.
Call your own company and see how the customer service is, and then send me a note on my LinkedIn account, which is on the screen here, and just tell me your observations. I'm just curious.
That's great.
So you had asked me the profile.
Any particular organizations? I know you're doing some work
nonprofits,
coming up, right?
Yeah, I do nonprofits, but anyone. I mean, customer service, retail. Doesn't have to be small, doesn't have to be big.
Right, can be even nonprofit because you're
doing
some work there.
Can be nonprofit, could be for-profit.
Great.
It doesn't have to be in any particular industry.
Great.
Yeah.
As long as it's customer service related, because that's your baby.
And if people want to be happy, that's my baby too,
There you
right?
go. That's great. Well, I am. Is there a last word or tip that you want to leave us with in regard to this topic?
Yeah. Fast track to promotion is to identify an issue, to, just like my client did, propose a resolution, and then have a conversation with your boss or supervisor about it, and then own it, see it to completion.